Praise Yahweh.
Praise Yahweh.
I'd like to thank everybody who came here on the 11th day of April 2010 to honor Father Yahweh's feast. I always hear, well, Yahweh brought all those here that He wanted here. But if I remember right, Scripture says all are to attend.
Sure.
This is a commandment. If Yahweh brought everybody here that He wanted here, don't you think this entire yard would be full of people? And the neighbor's yard? And possibly even the Detroit Lions football stadium?
Mm-hmm.
See, what has happened here is, according to Proverbs, the start of wisdom is the fear of Yahweh.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Those that fear Yahweh, there's a verse in the 22nd chapter, I think it's 14, of Revelation that says, those that keep Yahweh's commandments will be allowed to eat the fruit of everlasting life and enter everlasting life and enter the city. Do you think that might be the New Jerusalem? In the 22nd chapter of Revelation, if I remember right, a commandment might even be a royal edict. So if Yahweh said it, I believe it, I can claim it, I can honor it, and I can fear it. Or I can do whatever I want. That falls in the category of free will. We all have it. Those that honor Yahweh and become the true nation of Jacob, Israel, which is Yahweh's bride, in the end, will be honored in return. But in the meantime, we have to go through this world system that we're not a part of because we're just travelers here. And down through the course of the Hebrew history, starting from the war in Genesis 3:15, when the seed of the serpent will always battle against the seed of the woman, and if I remember right, the epistles of John were written to the lady elect, the children of the house of Israel, who were of a separate people, set apart above all other nations. And only Israel have I loved, said Yahweh God, the creator of heaven and earth. And there was nothing that was not created. John chapter 1 verse 3, and there was nothing that was created that was not created by Yahweh's word. And verse 14 of John chapter 1, and Yahweh's word became flesh. I'm going to refer to the creator of heaven and earth, King of Israel, as Yahweh today. I'm going to do away with all the pronouns, God, Lord, Jesus, Christos, Christ, which actually comes from the Sanskrit Krishna. So Christ, the word Christ light, goes way back to the Sanskrit, Krishna. And the Christians first called at Antioch were not Christians, because Christians is a Catholicistic word. They were Hebrews. But Isaiah said you would get a new name. And when the Hebrews came out of Assyrian bondage and crossed through the Caucasus Mountains, were then called Caucasians. And nobody else could claim that name. The Caucasians. As the new name given to the Hebrews. It's not Christians. Christians is a term of diversity, which includes anything, everything, right from the purebred down through all the mutts and the crossbreeds and the vagrants. Yahweh says, when you attend my feast, come to my royal party. That's enormous. His royal gathering only for the elect of Israel. We've gotten into a case and situation today where now we may have to go out and invite the Baptists, invite the Lutherans, invite the Catholics, as long as they're Jacob Israel, because those that know and understand who Yahweh is and His words and His ways will not honor His feast.
That's right.
So we may have to go out in the highways and byways and invite religious people in. You see, we know Nimrod set up religion, followed by Constantine that set up political religion and fine-tuned it. And it's been fine-tuned and fine-tuned and tweaked and renewed and revised and re-edited and re-established and put into system after system, because if you look at it now, and if you have a good understanding of Nimrod and history before Nimrod, we know it goes, the political religious system goes before Nimrod. And if you look at it, there's nothing new under the sun, because it's the same now as it was 500 years ago, as it was the same then as it was 500 years before that, and 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 we're getting ready here now, number one. Because, see, we're getting into a study today that compares the King James to the Latin Vulgate. The title for this message today is The Vulgated King James. Now that's an interesting topic, because the King James is full of Latin. Just like the pork is full of parasites. Just like the clam is full of the mercury that it pulls out of the water, out of the Chesapeake Bay, or whatever surrounding territory and water, body of water it would rest in. I've done a book report on 2 different books, and then I'm going to edit the King James just a little bit. This particular book here was written by a Jesuit in 2004, and I found a lie in it already. It's 2004, and in the first sentence, he says it's the 300th anniversary. But 1611 and 300 in 2004 from 1611, that's just short of 400 years. Or maybe he just meant, and you know how the Catholics are, well, it's still only the 300th year, and we can't stretch it out to 375 years. And I've taken some writings, several paragraphs, to get the theme of the book. And this is what this Jesuit author has to say. Amid the general jubilation over the 300th anniversary of the appearance of King James Version of the Bible. Now we know this word is Catholicistic, which means Book of the Son. That's why in all the Catholicistic writings, they'll have the circle behind an individual. Oh, they tell you it's a halo. But you know what? What is a halo? It's a representation of the sun. It's a worship of the sun god on that particular individual, whether it was Emmanuel or Mary or Peter or Paul or Pope whoever has already died. A halo is another diversive tact for you to believe in something that is false. I think it would be a pity if we did not make mention of that great church to which under some God we owe our possession of the sacred Scriptures. Now see, they could have put under Yahweh here, but he understands Yahweh's name, but he just used the generic pronoun. We owe our possession of the sacred Scriptures. I mean, of course, the Roman Catholic Church. The Protestant account of pre-Reformation Catholicism has been largely a falsification of history. All the faults and the sins that could possibly be piled up or invented against Rome or against particular bishops, priests, or Jesuits. Consequently, people have arrived to believe the tradition as a matter of course and accepted it as history. Now, if you stop and think back of all the actual historicity, the timeline of the people of the Caucasians in Western Europe, how the Roman Catholic Pope would send Inquisition or the secret Jesuits or the secret army from Rome into a particular nation to crush the Protestants or the Protestants, to keep the Latin Vulgate Scripture in the hands of the people who were able to read. They weren't all able to read. All came out of Rome, so when they say that all the sins that could possibly be raked up or invented is a matter of history. There's no invention to it. To understand properly the work of the Catholic Church in creating, look at here, they created and are defending and perpetuating Holy Scriptures, there are some common erroneous ideas which we would be well to clear away from out of your minds at the very outset. To begin with, the Bible did not drop from heaven. Well, he's right there. He's right there. The Bible did not drop from heaven ready-made, and in the second place, we should do well to remember that the Bible was not written all at once, but over some 1,500 years. The Bible was not written originally in English or Gaelic, nor Latin. Thus, our Bibles as we have them today are translations. He's doing good here so far. He's a fine Catholic Jesuit. That is, translations are a rendering or equivalence in English of the original Hebrew and Greek. On the Catholic plan, so they call it, on the Catholic plan of salvation through the teachings of the Church. Now this doesn't say the teaching of Yahweh God. Through the teaching of the Church, souls may be saved. The Bible and the Bible only. We Catholics, on the other hand, glory in having some third party to come between us and a God. Because God Himself has given it, the Bible, to us, the Catholic Church.
Yeah, not to Israel.
To teach us and lead us to Him. We believe in the Bible interpreted for us by the Catholic Church because God entrusted to her, the Catholic Church, the Bible as part of His Word.
Not all.
This is the Catholic Church, established by Almighty God. To the Catholic Church we listen. To the Catholic Church we obey. To the Catholic Church we submit our judgment and intellect, knowing the Catholic Church will never lead us wrong. The Vulgate is the correct version of the Scriptures. Now think about this. The way this writer says this is the Catholic Church. Her. 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 And other places. Her. Why does this writer, next please, refer to the Catholic Church in the feminine possessive?
The bride. The false bride.
I don't think that's next. Yeah, I understand that. All right, thank you. This Jesuit's going to go on here and explain now how they've got their hands on the Vulgate. But he just touches the tip of the iceberg. There was a translation of the Bible made, not interpreted, made into Latin about 150 A.D. All were finally superseded by the grand and most important version called the Vulgate. We find Constantine, the first Christian emperor after the Council of Nicaea, applying to Eusebius, Bishop of Caesarea and a great scholar, to provide 50 copies of the Christian scriptures for public use in the churches of Constantinople. Now remember, Christian is Catholicistic. Eusebius was a heathen, studied under heathen. I'm going to go into him more in a few minutes. But Constantine ordered 50 copies, and we're going to confirm this with a second witness shortly. This was in 332 A.D. The Council of Nicaea was in 324 or 25 A.D. In 332 A.D., Constantine ordered the 50 Bibles that introduced us to a very important point, which tells us eloquently of the office of the Catholic Church performed under God and the Holy Ghost in selecting and sifting and stamping with her divine authority on the scriptures of the, what does this mean? The new law. Look at this. The new law. Now if I stop and think, maybe that's how with the new law we no longer have to honor the holy day of rest, but worship the sun day. Excuse me. What I wish to drive home is that they got these books from Rome. Who got these books from Rome? All of Constantine's control throughout the Roman Empire in that day. Without Rome, without the Roman Catholic Church, somebody would not have the Bible. And that the decrees of Carthage 397 and 419 A.D., when all Christianity was Roman Catholic. Here we are again. Christianity. Christianity. See, anybody can be a Christianity, but not everybody can be an Anglo-Saxon. Was a Roman Catholic reaffirmed by the Council of Florence, 1442, under Pope Eugenius IV. And the Council of Trent, 1546. These decrees of the Roman Church, that these are the only means and the channel and the authority which Almighty God has used to hand down to us His written word. Who's able to deny it?
Me.
Well, I see about 1,000 hands out here.
10 million. 100 million.
Well, we're just in the near proximity here. The Church of St. Paul and St. Peter and St. James in the first century was the same church that was in the Council of Carthage and of Augustine in the 4th century, and the Council of Florence in the 15th century, and the Vatican in the 19th century, and the same body. Now stop and think of this. We've got people, this man's writing here and says that these three churches are the same body in the 4th century, through the 15th century, and through the 19th century. Is he trying to tell me that their leaders have not died for 1,500 years? Right here it says in his book they're the same body. Or is he saying that through the manipulation and the bent nails and the twisted springs that they've kept Roman Catholicism screwing the people down into the ground with its new law is just the same old doctrine with new faces?
New, same mindset.
Now, you may naturally ask me, but how do you know all this? Where has the Bible come from? Do you have the original writings that came from the hand of Moses or Paul or John? No, none of it. Not a scrap or a letter. So they can't deny it. We can't deny it either because it's all been destroyed. Nope, that's the one. The persecutors of the church for the first 350 years of Christianity destroyed everything Christian that they could get their hands on. Now, are these the heathen that the different popes and the different bishops from the Roman Catholic system would send out to loot the Caucasian lands and try and get them to fall for this phony Catholicism? Over and over again, barbarous pagans burst in upon Christians, Caucasian cities, not Christian. Barbarous pagans burst in upon Christian cities and villages and churches and burned all the sacred things they could find. The originals, as they came from the hand of the apostles and the prophets, have totally disappeared. Well, Mr. Constantine himself has some play to do in that. From when he had the Council of Nicaea, he invited everybody to bring all their paleo writings, all the ancient history they could, so they could figure out and set up and line up. And so we'd know exactly what is what and where, who went with what down the line. And what he did not burn, he saved and put into a private library for the upcoming popes through the next several centuries.
And he slew every one of them.
And yeah, that's right. He didn't have any trouble with Arius, who stood against Constantine. Arius had 10 members that went with him to the Council of Nicaea. And they stood against the 2-in-1 doctrine because they understood. Now, Arius lived another 7 years after that. But his scribes and people that went with him came up missing. And so did their manuscripts, because they were the ones carrying the books that Arius took. It is to the Catholic Church under God that we owe the preservation and the integrity of the sacred scriptures. The Old Testament she took from the Jewish church. See, they did. By the time they got the Talmud into different writings, like Ubius had the Talmud to work with, from the Jewish church, to which she added, see, the New Testament. See, the New Testament is a misnomer, just like the term Old Testament is a misnomer. They tell you, well, in order to have a testament, somebody died, so now you've got a will and testament here. All right, well, that's fine. We understand Emmanuel spent his time on the torture stake. But here for the Old Testament, who died? Who was it died to put them laws and judgments and traditions of the Hebrews into effect? There wasn't anybody die. As a matter of fact, Up until around 8 or 900 A.D., it wasn't even known as a testament. All the writings that were still available were known as Hebrew law, Hebrew history, Hebrew writings. The word Bible didn't come into play until later down the line, from Genesis to Malachi. It was Hebrew writings, even though later they started to take the Catholic influence and call it the Hebrew Bible. But it was never until after 800 A.D. was it referred to as the Hebrew Bible. The work of her own apostles, the Jesuits, see? That's how they got added the New Testament. The work of her, the Catholic Church, her own apostles, the Jesuits, and the bishops, she has preserved. Okay, now, do you think they put in this preserve just a little bit of acid? Or a little bit of pectin? Too much sugar? Aspartame, maybe. She has preserved the Holy Scriptures from error, saved them from destruction, multiplied them in every language under heaven, put them with the necessary prudence in her people's hands. To the Catholic Church, on the other hand, in her long history, the Catholic Church has nothing to be ashamed of in the Catholic Church's treatment of the Bible. Isn't that an understatement? Has nothing to be ashamed of. Now we're going to go into a book report here. Mr. Wilkerson here was a Baptist minister. He was a deacon in a theological seminary that was in Washington, D.C. This book came out in 1930, in the middle of the Great Depression, or at the first part of the Great Depression, before his theological school had to have the debt paid off by some Jew finance house. The King James Vindicated is the name of this book. While John the Baptist lived, heresy could make no serious headway on the people. After the death of the Apostle John, 4 names stand out in whose teachings contributed heresy and to the issuing of issuing of manuscripts of corrupt testaments. These names are Justin Martyr, Tatian, Clement of Alexander, Origen. In the teachings of Justin Martyr, we begin to see how muddy the stream of pure Hebrew history changing. 50 years after the death of the Apostle John, it was Tatian, Justin Martyr's pupil, that these regrettable doctrines came into being. The same Tatian wrote the Harmony of the Gospels, which was called the Didaceran. The Gospels were so notoriously corrupt by Tatian's hands that in about 225 A.D., a bishop of Syria, because of the erroneous errors, was obliged to throw out of his congregation no less than 200 copies of the Didaceran. We come now to Tatian's pupil, known as Clement of Alexander, 200 A.D. He took this twist much further than Tatian, that he founded a school in Alexandria. Clement expressly tells us that he would not hand down Hebrew teachings pure and unmixed, but rather clothed with precepts of philosophy. When we come to Oregon, we speak the name of Him who did the most of all to create and give direction to the forces of apostasy down through the centuries. It was Oregon who mightily influenced Jerome, the editor of the Latin Bible known as the Vulgate. Eusebius worshipped at the altar of Origen's teaching. Origen corrupted manuscripts of the Scriptures were all well arranged and balanced with subtlety. Origen had so surrendered himself to the turning all Bible events into allegories, stories, fairy tales, mythology. Origenism flooded the Catholic Church through Jerome, the father of Latin Christianity. Yeah, the father of Latin Christianity. He did the most to corrupt the Scriptures, and followed up by Jerome. Well, here we come back to Constantine. Constantine became emperor in 312 A.D. A little later, he embraced the Christian faith for himself and for his empire. As this so-called, see, that's a good word there, as this so-called first Christian emperor took the reins of the civil, the government, and the spiritual, the religion, took the reins of the government and the religion of the world to bring about the amalgamation of paganism and Christianity. So he wants to bring the pagans and the Christianity together so that he'd have a great big kingdom. As the Emperor Constantine embraced Christianity, he had to choose which Bible he would allow the people to read. The one written by Origen and edited by Eusebius, the outstanding intellectual figure that had combined Christianity with Gnosticism with his philosophy. Even Constantine himself had the political genius that was seeking to unite Christianity with pagan Rome. The philosophy of Origen was well suited to serve Constantine's religious, political theocracy. The type of Bible selected by Constantine has held the dominating influence in the history of the universal Catholic Church. Everybody's invited. Red, yellow, black, and brown. Even are all welcome to town. Right here, universal. See, now this goes back, universal goes back to an interesting statement I heard lately. See, you can have ice cream over here. You can have axle grease over here. They both have fine value for their worth. But if you mix them together, you've got a worthless nothing. Now that's interracial mongrelization. That's universalism.
That's religion.
Your religious political system, theocracy. This manuscript, called the Vaticanus, is supposed to have come from the same place as the Sinaitic manuscript. It flourishes for a short space. The span of one generation sufficed to see it disappear from popular use, as if it had been struck by some invisible and withering blast. For 900 years, the first Latin translation held their own after the Vulgate appeared. The Vulgate was born about 380 A.D. Now this is interesting that the first of the Latin manuscripts only lasted a generation. But see, the Hebrews in the lying areas would not accept them, but the Latin Vulgate was still there. The local Catholic universal priests and preachers and bishops and Jesuits had all those manuscripts ready and at hand to use. That's why it mentioned that the originals only lasted one generation. It's just like, we'll get into the other one later. The Textus Receptus was the Bible of the early Christian early Hebrews, of the great Syrian church, of the Waldean church of northern Italy. This is where the tribe of Gad settled. The Gaelic church in southern France. This is where Zebulun settled. And the Gaelic church in Scotland and Ireland. Now Scotland and Ireland is where the tribe of Zara Pharez settled, from Judah's oldest son, as well as the Bible and the Greek Catholic Church. That should be Orthodox Church. All these churches were in opposition to the Church of Rome at that time.
They still are.
And they still are today. That's correct. The Bible was translated from the original Hebrew and Aramaic in Syria about 150 A.D. In 177 A.D., the Gaelic Hebrews were frightfully massacred by the heathen. Just like the first book report I had. The heathen went in and slaughtered the Hebrews. The destruction of the Waldensians, since recorded beginning about 600 A.D. by Gregory I, was carried out by the secret agents of the papacy. See, Rome's been behind a lot of this heathen persecution. Where did the Vaudois church, amid the rugged peak of the Alps, secure these uncorrupted manuscripts? The Waldensians and the Vaudosians were among the first of Europe to obtain the pure translation of the Hebrew writings hundreds of years before the Reformation. See, as Paul traveled through a lot of Europe, he didn't just stay in Rome and die. He didn't just go back to Jerusalem and, get beat up because somebody rumored that he brought a heathen into the temple, which he disputed in front of King Felix, that says, first of all, they can't prove what they're saying, and second of all, I believe everything written in the law, which includes, I would have to die if I brought a heathen into the church, into the temple. In the Alps, this is also another area that the tribe of Gad settled. These Caucasian lands had the writings that Paul and his scribes had brought there. This is why they're pure. All right, now to save time, we're going to jump ahead, and we're not going to follow the line of different popes that went in through Western Europe and tried to destroy all the manuscripts they could. We're going to talk a little bit about how the Jesuits went into Oxford University and changed the writings from Oxford. The center of this work was at Oxford University. The movement also involved the revision of the authorized King James Version. Much had to be done to discredit the English people's eyes of the Reformation and the history of the Reformation, the doctrines of the Reformation, and this was accomplished by those while working undercover, passing as friends. They are Jesuits in all classes of society. Now, isn't that how the Jews work today? They pass off as a friend and a buddy, and then you don't even know how they're going to get in your pocket. The Jesuits in all classes of society, in Parliament, among the English clergy, among the Protestant everyday people, even in the higher stations, like tax collectors. I could not comprehend how a Jesuit could be a Protestant priest.
Right.
Why is it that in 1833 England believed that the Reformation was the work of God, Yahweh God, but in 1883, 50 years here, it believed that the Reformation was a rebellion? Same thing happened in America here since 1913 when we gave up our money system. In 1833, England believed that the Pope was the Antichrist.
That's right.
In 1883, 50 years here, that the Pope was the successor of the apostles.
Because they penetrated the churches.
All are agreed that the year 1833 marked the beginning of the Oxford movement. Now see, let me interject something here. How many here think that the Vatican was handed the keys to the kingdom from Peter? On this rock I shall build my church, Peter. Alright? Now remember, when Peter was crucified, he was crucified upside down. You think maybe them keys fell out of his pocket and in Rome, not really knowing what to do with them, just took them over and stuck them away? Romanism is known to have recently entered the Church of England. Romanism in England now. In the disguise through Oxford. The name Newman came up. I couldn't find his first name, but he used to be a Protestant. Newman gave the date of July 14th, 1833. 5 days after, Newman returned from Rome as the beginning of the Oxford movement. In other words, the Jesuits of Oxford simply changed Oxford's character over the course of time, little by little.
Just like America.
Like to turn the heat up on the Americans, little by little. Step by step, we are told that Newman led the movement skillfully towards Rome. Dr. Weissman remarked that the Jesuits one day, the Catholics both think and speak the truth except when consideration is necessary, and then will be false or utter falsehood so that he can sacrifice himself. Now that's just an everyday person he's talking about out, or the Jesuits out, trying to get the Roman doctrine, Catholicistic doctrine, instilled in the people's mind skillfully, little by little. Utter falsehood so that he sacrifices himself for the Mother Church. Make yourself clear that you are justified in deception, and then lie like a trooper for the Mother Church. Interesting now. Isn't that how the Jews do it today? Yeah. Any of these candidates today, when they run for office, under the corporate law, they can tell you anything they want. Once they're elected and they take their oath under corporate law, they no longer have to adhere to anything they said because they become a new individual under corporate law. They're no longer candidate who can say whatever he wants to get into office. He now becomes candidate. Not running candidate, standing candidate. So he can do whatever he wants once he's elected. Corporate law. You think that's one of the new laws from Rome that I read earlier, the new law?
This is why Judeo-Christianity are second-hand Catholics.
Thank you. And the good doctor reminds us once again. The Mother Church has been incorporated into every religious system in America, in France, in Germany, in Russia, in Africa, in India, in China, in Japan, in North Korea, in South Korea, here, there, everywhere, any place, anytime, any place.
Including Tibet.
Including the monasteries of Tibet. You're absolutely right.
Dalai Lama.
The superior of the Franciscans. Now this is another, the Jesuit. The Franciscans, the Jesuits, and the Cardolians. That's not quite right, but that's close.
The Dominicans too.
These are all of the educational branch of Romanism,
Yes.
the Vatican, the Catholicism. They have to do with interpreting and rewriting the Scriptures. And if they find a new document, they'll take the document, they'll send one page to each branch. And then the fourth page, until a document's spread. So whoever's editing and translating and rewriting these documents, they don't know what the other guy's doing. So the only ones that really know is the white pope and the black pope and those in the immediate inner circle. The superior of the Franciscans, Father Benigno, wishes to engage in an English authorized translation of the Bible, that he would take the Protestant translation corrected by the Vulgate and get it sanctioned here in Rome. This might be our next work to the Lordship, the Pope, approved if the Lordship, see the Lordship here, you always think when you say Lord, think of the Pope. Don't think of Yahweh, think of the Pope. It's all, in all the writings. It should go to a few select revisers, all Jesuits. And see, the Protestant translation in this day in 1833 was the Bishop's Bible. And the Geneva and the Bishop's Bible sort of went hand in hand in England in that day. It is interesting at this juncture to take a glance at Dr. Westcott and Hort, the dominating mentalities of the scheme of revision. Now here we're up in about 1875 to 1880. Westcott and Hort. The friends of the devotees of the King James Bible naturally wished that certain retouches be given to the book of books, which would replace words that were considered obsolete, bring about a uniformity to the more modern spelling rules and the grammar, and correct some of the considerate of few plain and clear blemishes in the revised text. Dr. Hort, even by his own confession at the time, he had read little of the Greek New Testament and knew nothing of the text and certainly nothing of Hebrew. He dared, when only 23 years old, to call the received texts villainous and vile. Now here this guy's 3 years into his adulthood and knows nothing of the Greek, knows nothing of the Hebrew, and he says, because he's been counseled by some Jesuits and by some bishops and to Catholicism, that the bishops is vile and villainous. Ever since the revised version was printed, it was met with strong opposition. The people didn't like the new international version that Westcott and Hort put out. So it was set off to the side until after 1930, and then it was brought back into publication. Then the Westcott and Hort was met with strong opposition. The Protestant world and the royal authority twice refused to associate itself with the project of the revision. Cardinal Weissman exalts that the revision movement vindicates the Catholic Bible. The influence of the Oxford movement crossed the ocean and began in the United States. On his way to the United States, Dr. Schaff spent some time in England. Upon his arrival in America, and at his inauguration into the office, which he accepted within the German Reformed Church, he started the little by little change. Dr. Schaff's teachings endorsed the papal hierarchy of the Middle Ages. As in England, so in America. 2 companies were formed for revision, one of the Old and one of the New Testament. The Episcopalians declined to nominate any members from the Episcopalian body to the revision committee. Dr. Schaff filled out the list. The American committees entered their work prejudiced in favor of the Vulgate because of the changes which came about in the 19th century. There arose a new type of Protestantism and a new version of the Protestant Bible. The new Protestant arose from the new doctrine. Now the question of Pilate that he asked of Emmanuel, what is truth? That's not a pathetic question. The error of those who say that only by balancing one version against another or by examining the various manuscripts readings of the apostates as well as those of the faithful, we can arrive at the approximate truth, almost true, nearly, not quite. But see, balancing apostate and faithful. Alright, this is what the guy's saying about the Vulgate. Let's have the other. Now this is an interesting document. This is a concordance. Up just a little bit, please. Thank you. This is a concordance. Large and ample tables, alphabetical. The first. See, that's an old English first, because it was printed in 1611. This up here, F-I-R-S-T. The first containing the interpretation of the Hebrew, Chaldean, Greek, and Latin words and names, scattering dispersed throughout the whole Bible. See, here we go. This is an authentic, bona fide edition of a concordance that was sold on eBay for nearly $500. Printed in 1611, I was able to copy and paste this particular page. He showed the front page here as part of his advertisement to sell this writing. And the Latin is in, see right down here, it'll tell you it's in the Geneva. But it's also in the bishops. It's also in the King James. Next, please.
Non-revised.
Even the 1611 King James, before there were any revisions made.
That's right.
Now we're going to get interesting here. This is a book report on the King James. Now, I just completed a book report by a Baptist deacon of a theological seminary. I just did a book report on a book by a fine Catholic Jesuit. Now I'm going to do a book report on the King James Version, the Authorized. Is it the best? Question. The King James is arguably the greatest piece of English literature ever, next to some of Shakespeare's writings.
Yes.
Shortly after the Authorized version was first published in 1611, it came under fire. Then here was another book that the general public had problems accepting right out the gate. The 1611 came under fire. There has been a revival of criticism as contemporary versions have found their way into the mainstream of the Bible reading public. Hebrew and Greek words can be translated in more than one way. Those familiar with biblical languages know many phrases have several meanings. That's why whenever I speak at a critical point, I'll give you as many meanings as feasible as possible, and as James Strong gives in his concordance, so that as I tell you how I work this word out, and if it has 7 meanings, I give you all 7 of those meanings, and you think into it, gives us something to talk about later where maybe I've missed something. How many revisions? First, there were printing errors. There was the Wicked Bible, which omitted not from the commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery, which said, thou shalt commit adultery. The Vinegar Bible, with the parable of the vinegar. See, the parable of the vineyard turned into the parable of the vinegar because of the printing error. The Unrighteous Bible, where the unrighteous shall enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, see, they slipped on top of righteousness there, and it was an error. The early editions used both and or either, he or she, at the Ruth 3:15, in particular, different editions, making that edition the he or the she Bible. Between 1611 and 1644, there were 182 editions of the 1611 King James. 1629 edition omitted the Apocrypha from some printings, not all. 1659, William Kilbourne found 20,000 errors and 6 different editions made in 1650, 51, 52, 53 through 59. 20,000 errors in 6 different editions. 1660, the marginal references known as your center concordance were added and introduced into the holy parchments. 1727, thousands of errors were amended by the King James printers. 1762, Farrell and Paris had modernized the language. So see, 1762, there's already another revision here. 1769, extensive revision by B. Blaney. See, the King James wasn't perfect. From here we'll go to the Anti-Baptists. The 1795 edition was the Murderer's Bible, which rendered in Mark 7:27 as, let the children first be killed. See, by changing one letter, instead of being filled, you turn a book into a whole new doctrine. Blady's edition became standard until 1873, the Cambridge Paragraph Bible edited by Scrivener. While a 1611 edition had then, in the 1611, then came Judas. And see, after they noticed that, let's see, Matthew 26:36 is where then came Jesus into Gethsemane with his disciples. Quite a difference. Judas never made it to the time of the first breaking of bread. Do you know these words in the King James? Now, all these words here are in the King James edition of the Bible. Almug, Algum, Chode, Cherazim, Chapt, Earring, Gat, Habergion, Hoshen, Kopp. These are all names in the King James. Help, please. These are all the different names for the same person in the King James. And you get a difference in spelling for Seth, Pua, Kish, Agar, Hagar, Jeremiah, Jeremias, Jeremy, Enos, Enosh, Enoch, Enoch, Jared, Jared, Noe, Noah, Jonah, Jonah, Jonas. See, this is what you end up with when you have an editing. I've said for years, the King James is an editing. Next, please. Now here's some of the problems with the King James. King James was an anti-Baptist. King James did not like the Baptists. Since the 1930s, the Baptists have been the greatest defenders of the King James Version of the Bible. Since the 30s. Today, the Baptists want to idolize King James, and they have no ideas that the King James hated the Baptists. All the King James editors were deacons on the Anglican Church of England. King James had imprisoned Baptist ministers for their defiance of the Anglican Church of England. The Baptists used the Geneva Bible and thought the King James was not inspired. King James personally had Thomas Helways, a Baptist preacher, jailed for a small article he wrote against the King James Bible. Even John Bunyan was against the King James, the Anglican Church. Even though he was a Puritan, he still ended up getting 12 years in prison because he would not comply with the King James or the Anglican Church. In the early days of the 13 colonies, the Baptists, the Puritans, and the Quakers were persecuted for their use of the Geneva Bible. They were scorned. People didn't talk to them. They were beat with rods. They were put in stocks. See, in the 13 colonies, they were put in jail till Thomas Jefferson, when he was governor of Virginia, passed a law that stopped the Church of England's Inquisition in the new land. Go right to the last page. See, the King James was opposed even before it came to the United States. No, I'm done. I'm done. The King James, when it came out, the learned scholars in the Hebrew were not even invited to be on the translating or the editing committee, purely because the Anglican Church knew that they could not twist, they could not turn the thoughts and the ideas of those Hebrews that were staunch and stout in their way and would not be swayed. Now I hope today, through this small message that I gave, you could see and understand how Rome has its fingers in the King James Version is not the pure, is not the inerrant word of Yahweh God. It's a translation that has many meanings that if you do not study, if you do not work diligently to interpret many spurious passages, you'll stay with God and Lord and all the rest of the superfluous pronouns that will just keep the blind, leading the blind into the ditch. So think on these things. The Latin, the vulganized King James, it's in your house today. I'd like to thank everybody that stayed awake. I'd like to thank everybody who thought this was a good message. Because I'd just like to ask Yahweh to bless you into this particular message because it's dear to my heart. Study to show yourself worthy. Praise Yahweh.
Praise Yahweh.